In today's news, tourists to pay an estimated $500 for testing and the contact tracing app. And the Premier says the tourists should have waited for protocols before booking their trips.
Also, nationals to quarantine at home but required to pay an estimated $500, and careful flight scheduling at the T.B.Lettsome International Airport. All this and so much more when 284 News returns.
How does financial services benefit the BVI? It's been around for more than 3 decades before the World Wide Web and is now part of the everyday life of our islands. More than 2,200 people are directly employed in financial services, and another 3,000 jobs are supported indirectly. Jobs are corporate service providers, lawyers, insolvency, accounting, banking, insurance, regulators. That's almost 27% of the national workforce. Of those, more than 65% are BVI landers and belongers. What about restaurants, supermarkets, or shops? Well, 100% of people eat. So, they buy food. They buy swimsuits and shampoo and cars and power tools and plantains and fish and roti and pates. Financial services employees buy painkillers and lots of beer. Then there's electricity and dental floss and toilet paper and pretty much everything else. And everyone needs a roof over their heads and a place to do business, so we all rent or buy from a local landlord. Housing and office space alone means millions of dollars into the pockets of BVI families. At the end of the day, everyone benefits, including charities who receive thousands of dollars every year. And more than 60% of all government revenues come from fees paid by financial services. This money is spent on schools, roads, ports, scholarships, the environment, health, sports, children, youths, and the elderly. Financial services contributes more than $290 million to the BVI economy. That's more than 30% of all economic activity is driven by financial services. This creates thousands of jobs all across the islands, meaning more people have a way to earn a living. What does financial services do for the BVI? Let's just say it keeps our lights on. Financial services is everybody's business. So, come on, mind your business and let's not keep this to ourselves.
Welcome there, viewers. Today is Wednesday, October 28, 2020, and of course, we are coming to you live right out of the British Virgin Islands. It is always my pleasure. My name is Kyla Kenesha Forbes.
And I am Javon Wilson. So happy to be joining you once again. As a matter of fact, happy that you can join us on this beautiful Wednesday. A little rain here and there, but nevertheless, we have to carry on with the people's business, your local, regional, as well as your international news. Now, beginning with the press conference last night, Kyla, a government press conference hosted by the Minister of Finance and Premier of the Virgin Islands, Honorable Andrew A. Fahie, in collaboration with the Minister of Health, Honorable Carvin Malone. Coming out of that press conference, we now have a projected cost for the testing as well as the contact tracing app that is being proposed by government as it relates to tourists coming back into the territory December 1st. And I know ever since that announcement was made, Kyla, not just the December 1st date, but the possibility of a 4 to 8 day quarantine, many persons, and this includes residents, business persons, and especially our tourists coming into the country, wanting to know what the cost of that will be. We do know that it's going to be just around $500 estimated here and there, but shockingly, a number that I guess a lot of us did not expect to hear. In addition to that, Kyla, we do hear the Premier saying that his government will not bear blame for the record cancellations that we have seen by the local businesses over the last 48 hours. Of course, ever since that announcement was made, he has plain out said, Kyla, that it was irresponsible for tourists to go about booking without these protocols ruled out.
Most definitely. And Javon, I think for the next few days, we will be speaking about this rollout. Definitely something that has been highly anticipated. And also what we'll be covering also today is the fact that at the international airport. Of course, we know in the first instance, travel to the BVI will be exclusive to the international airport. And the Premier basically said that they will have careful scheduling and having flights basically 90 minutes behind of the next, just to make sure that the team can sanitize the airport. So very careful protocols over at the international airport. But also the Premier said that the evidence may show that the BVI is actually a bit more accommodating with its protocols. So definitely, Javon, we have so much to get into.
Wow, quite a
so
mouthful.
viewers, we will not waste any more time. So let's jump into it.
All right, viewers, now under the recently announced reopening protocols, incoming BVI tourists will now be mandated to foot an estimated $500 cost per person for the testing as well as the contact tracing app during their stay in the territory. Now, the clarifications was made just last night during the press conference hosted October 27 by the Premier of the Virgin Islands, Honorable Andrew A. Foy, as well as our Minister of Health, Honorable Carvin Malone. According to the Minister of Health, Honorable Carvin Malone, there are plans to substantially reduce the PCR test from the current $135 that we know it to be to $100 in light of the amount of tests that are now required during the quarantine process for visitors. Listening.
Okay, yes. Right now, for instance, right, the tests are at $135 per test at the hospital. We are going to substantially reduce that. We have a number of donors who are intent on making sure that we are afforded the additional equipment to increase our capacities for testing, and to look in terms of the particular pieces needed, all of the equipment needed, all of the samples, all of the test kits needed in order to get this cost down. We would like to bring it down in terms of the test, probably to $100, so that we can then, if we have 3 tests, it's $300. If we break it down to 2 tests, it'll be $200. But in terms of the particular app that you'll have to download on your phone, in terms of the particular tracking device and so forth, I think that cost is about how much?
That cost is about $150.
$150.
I want to put in perspective for you. The cost roughly right now to do the security is about $200 per night to government on an average. The cost of the app is roughly going to be about $150. The bracelet with a GPS system in it is going to be $150. But I need to state that that's it, $150 for the entire trip. And then when you leave, you turn it back in, it's sanitized, and it'll be reusable for, when the next visitor comes, or however it's going to come, that person will come. So that's how that cost will be handled. And so it is a significant cost savings from what we do have now. And also there are a lot of features with it that is a great plus, because it will definitely have your area that you have been assigned program into it. But the app also will be able, in a feature, to identify if there are persons who enter that space that not supposed to be into the space around the same app. So it's a very high-tech feature that we have introduced, and it has been proven and tested in other areas. So it's not something that's going to be used here as what we will quote as a guinea pig, because very important that we maintain the safety of it all. So
Those were our territory leaders, of course, speaking to the cost now associated with testing as well as contact tracing. Now, Minister Malone also said that the lab director, as of October 27, 2020, that is yesterday, said that the territory currently has about 11,000 test kits. However, the government intends to increase that amount to 25,000 prior to the December 1st reopening. He further said that the government is currently trying to secure the relevant equipment to ensure a 24-hour turnaround as it relates to our test results. Now, when we speak about the app, Kyla, the Minister of Health also stated, and I quote, "With the insertion or the application of the app of which we speak, we're going to be able to then cut back on that very expensive notion of having physical security. With these new proposed protocols, with the track and the trace device, with the particular automatic or particular bracelet, we would not need physical security anymore. So that cost, which is the $3,500 that persons mentioned, is now zeroed out. We are going to be able to make sure, though, that folks adhere to the protocols that will be set to in the period in which they have, or which in they are here, sorry, end of quote." Now, it was further clarified, viewers, that the app will work to retrieve tracking information even when the internet is down. Premier Fahie said that the info will be uploaded once the app reconnects to data or Wi-Fi. It was also clarified as well that it is waterproof. So I guess essentially persons will be able to go swimming. Now, visitors are now also able to quarantine at their hotel of choice. And Kyla, I know this was another major concern. Where would the visitors quarantine once they get here to the BVI? When the question was posed to our Honorable Minister today, Minister of Health, Honorable Carver Malone, he said persons will be able to quarantine at their hotel of choice, whichever hotels they're booked to stay at. Now, the proposed app and bracelet will also ensure that they remain confined to that space for the duration and the quarantine period. Now, there are some concerns brewing on how the authorities will be able to track tourists if that bracelet is intently removed during that vacation. It is yet to be declared whether a special unit will be devised to trace and monitor all the tourists while in the territory. Now, additionally, tourists will be required to have medical insurance, and that includes their COVID-19 coverage, of course, before they're allowed entry into the BVI. The BVI Gateway app, of course, the app we've been speaking about here at 284 Media, will be commissioned on November 2nd, 2020, and persons can access that portal at bvigateway.bviaa.com. Kyla, wow. Much needed information after a long anticipated wait. Finally, we hear the government associating a cost to the protocols that have been laid out across the board. Some persons, well, a lot of persons, ever since the news was announced, have denounced it, saying that it is a bit much in light of the fact that, you know, other countries across the region who also sell tourism as one of their main products are not required, persons are not required to pay as hefty as a fee. But we do know, as much as we want to re-welcome guests into the territory, we know that that should not come as an expense, really, to the government of the BVI.
Understood, yeah.
But I think what persons are really concerned about is the amount of testing that is now required on the newly announced protocol, saying that it may be a bit much and maybe that number should be revised by the health authorities.
Most definitely, Javon. After the rolling out on the 26th of October, persons had much questions, and I'm really glad to see the Honorable Premier alongside the Minister of Health sitting down and answering the relevant questions. Of course, I think they're still very open, and he actually said that they're open to hearing what the public has to say as we move forward. So I'm really glad to see these answers coming out. That cost bit was a big concern for many persons, so I'm glad that that was clarified.
Absolutely.
Most definitely. Now, as we move on, and I'm going to continue to say now, for the last few days and continuing on, we will be examining the protocols for reopening for tourism right here in the British Virgin Islands, you know, which was rolled out, as I said before, on the 26th of October by the Premier of the Virgin Islands. Now, Premier Honorable Andrew A. Fahie adamantly, you know, he is adamant about the safety of all visitors and residents of the BVI as we prepare to enter this new phase of what we call the new normal. Now, it was revealed that each flight coming into the T.B.Lettsome International Airport, once opened on December first will be scheduled to lag 90 minutes behind the next to ensure that the airport will not be overloaded, of course, and can adequately prepare and sanitize for the next flight. Premier Fahie said during the unveiling of the tourism industry protocols, he said, and I quote, "On arrival at the T.B.Lettsome International Airport, Beef Island travelers would be directed to our newly constructed welcoming center for screening, relaxing environment, which is located before the traveler goes to immigration." He continued, and I quote, "This new facility, which is being established at the airport, will accommodate 90 passengers. It should be noted that in our continued efforts to put safety first, arrival flights will be staggered so that there will be a 90-minute lag between flights, ensuring that at no time there are two flights on the ground simultaneously. This time lapse will also allow the team to sanitize the facility and to prepare for the next flight," end quote. Premier Fahie made it clear that we are not going to spare any details to ensure safety. Now, Javon, this is also a great point we see just across the board where the government is trying their best to make sure from the very beginning with visitors touching down that they're in a safe but also a very comfortable environment.
And that is key, Kyla. I think one of the things that will continue to attract tourists to our shores is the fact that we have really managed to keep those numbers down. So we are basically promoting ourselves as a COVID-free environment. But we really have to, and I know that one of the prime reasons the Premier said from inception, he's directing all traffic in the first phase through the T.B.Lettsome International Airport is because he wants controlled re-entry.
Yes.
And this is something that is very challenging when you think about the seaports, even though we know for sure that the marine industry is taking a big hit. I think what the Premier essentially wants to do is test the system through the T.B.Lettsome International Airport. So I do think this is a great approach in the first phase. We look forward to seeing some improvements as it relates to increasing our guests. Like we said earlier, we only have about 11,000 tests right now. That will be vamped up to $25,000 hopefully by December 1st, according to government. But clearly still not as much as we will need, definitely, especially if community transmission happens, and we will also need to test residents as well.
Most definitely. Now, viewers, still ahead, Premier Fahie says tourists should have waited for protocols before booking and stresses that the BVI's protocols are more accommodating than other destinations. All this and so much more when 284 News returns.
How does financial services benefit the BVI? It's been around for more than 3 decades before the World Wide Web and is now part of the everyday life of our islands. More than 2,200 people are directly employed in financial services, and another 3,000 jobs are supported indirectly. Jobs are corporate service providers, lawyers, insolvency, accounting, banking, insurance, regulators. That's almost 27% of the national workforce. Of those, more than 65% are BVI landers and belongers. What about restaurants, supermarkets, or shops? Well, 100% of people eat. So, they buy food. They buy swimsuits and shampoo and cars and power tools and plantains and fish and roti and pates. Financial services employees buy painkillers and lots of beer. Then there's electricity and dental floss and toilet paper and pretty much everything else. And everyone needs a roof over their heads and a place to do business, so we all rent or buy from a local landlord. Housing and office space alone means millions of dollars into the pockets of BVI families. At the end of the day, everyone benefits, including charities who receive thousands of dollars every year. And more than 60% of all government revenues come from fees paid by financial services. This money is spent on schools, roads, ports, scholarships, the environment, health, sports, children, youths, and the elderly. Financial services contributes more than $290 million to the BVI economy. That's more than 30% of all economic activity is driven by financial services. This creates thousands of jobs all across the islands, meaning more people have a way to earn a living. What does financial services do for the BVI? Let's just say it keeps our lights on. Financial services is everybody's business. So, come on, mind your business and let's not keep this to ourselves.
Viewers, welcome back to 284 News. Thank you so much for sticking with us. Now, as we begin to wrap up, the Premier of the Virgin Islands and Overseeing Minister of Tourism, Honorable Andrew A. Foy, has said that his government is not willing to take full responsibility for the surge in tourist cancellations reported by local hospitality businesses since the announcement of the reopening of protocols. Now, local companies have been inundated with calls of cancellation, some reporting up to $20,000 in losses within the last 24 hours. However, the Premier has said this is no fault of the government, further reiterating that it may have been irresponsible for tourists to book before protocols were rolled out. Now, if you missed the press conference, listen in on what the Premier of the Virgin Islands had to say.
Well, I don't want to get into the businesses' accounts because I did see a lot of it on social media that they have already had such and such an amount of cancellations. I don't know if it is me, but I would have to stand corrected. I am concerned about bookings before you know the protocols, because then you would have been booking in anticipation that the protocols would be according to how you might be seeing them. So I have asked persons in different industries, when you say that you made loss due to the protocols, what does that really mean? Some of them have told me today that it wasn't really because of the protocols per se, but because that persons book like the year before. So when they leave, they have bookings and say, I'll be back next year. But when they did that, there was not COVID-19. So some of those bookings would have been lost as a result of that. Some persons were booking in anticipation of the protocols, and then when it has been announced, which it has, it probably didn't work in that spectrum that they were thinking. So it's difficult for government anywhere to take full responsibility for the loss of these bookings before the protocols were established, to say, well, all right, the protocols have been established, then you book. But if you book before the protocols were established and then blame a government anywhere in the world, I still would have to do some more research on that. And that's nothing towards the businesses not trying to be proactive, but to throw all of that on any government is a little much.
Now, that may come as a surprise to many persons across the territory. The Premier's sentiment was strongly rebutted, however, during the live press conference, with many business owners, tourists, and residents alike condemning the government's decision to announce the reopening date before actually establishing the much-needed protocols. One businessman commented, and I quote, "Since last night's update, we've seen 9 cancellations. That is $7,780 in refunds. It's ugly, but this too shall pass." End of quote. Another viewer said, and I quote, "The Premier's comments are disingenuous, considering that an announcement was made by his government only a few weeks ago that the BVI was opening for tourism on December 1. That article she's speaking about was captioned, "BVI reopens for visitors December." Now, that press release was dropped specifically to generate bookings for the lucrative holiday high season, which it did succeed in doing. There are no suggestions in the message that tourists should wait and see how strict the protocols would be before booking. Seems obvious to me, in hindsight, that the press release and the tourist board's media campaign were both deliberately vague. Reminds me of what we in the US call a bait and switch. The questions are, why was it done, and who reaps the benefit? End of quote. And finally, viewers, another tourist said, and I quote once again, "To say you are going to welcome back tourists, then people will anticipate they are welcome. The protocols should not have come, a month after the welcome message. You have to take some responsibility for this, surely." Now, if yours like that last visitor said, the BVI Love campaign indeed was launched on September 21st by the government and the BVI Tourist Board, and it states, and I quote, "Everything is ready for you. We just hope you are ready for us. When should you come? There's no better time like the present. Come now. We are open December 1st, 2020." End of quote. Now, with record cancellations in the Premier's recent sentiments, residents and tourists alike have since said that the BVI Love campaign was premature and deceiving, adding that it is a slap in the face for tourists who take pride in visiting the territory. However, the Premier maintains that recent decisions are in the best interest of everyone involved. He said, and I quote, "I'm a businessman also. I have no intention of seeing any business suffer, but it's a tough call with some of these areas, and I do not want to live as Premier and do something out of pressure, knowing that it's going to have an adverse effect on the population." Kyla, very strong sentiments coming from the wider BVI community, but even residents abroad as it relates to these protocols. Many of them, and we've seen it under numerous threads, various stories across the board, they've plain out said, "We are not coming. This is not practical. We cannot afford to quarantine and to come for that amount of time. We are canceling our trips. We need our refunds." And this really comes as a huge backlash and really as a disadvantage to our local businesses who now will have to, of course, cancel and refund customers as necessary.
It is very disheartening and really troubling, especially for our local businesses within the tourism sector. After taking such a blow for so many months now, seeing some bit of light, and then for it to be taken from you in just a grab is very unfortunate. But I think at the end of the day, we want to encourage visitors that at the end of it, this is not us not welcoming you to the BVI, but I think the Premier, essentially, I think what he's trying to say is that we're trying our best here with what we are given. We're in COVID-19 times, and we're just trying to accommodate everyone, which is also what he was saying in this upcoming story that I will quickly go through before we basically close out, because Honorable Andrew A. Fahie, of course, the Premier of the Virgin Islands, explained that the evidence shows that the protocols and measures enforced by the BVI are more accommodating to visitors than many of the other destinations. Now, Javon, as we know, we were just speaking about, many persons are complaining about these newly unveiled protocols, and as you were just speaking about the fact that maybe feeling that the BVI Love campaign was a bit misleading, but the Premier said, and I quote, "Among the countries that are having better results through control measures, the evidence is also there that the BVI's measures are more accommodating to visitors than that of many other destinations," he pointed out. Now, Premier Fahie continued, "In many of these destinations, the quarantine period for COVID-19 negative visitors is 14 days. This means that visitors are confined to the accommodation property, paying to do so for 14 days. The BVI's measures facilitate some limited movement after 4 days in the territory and unrestricted movement after 8 days of being in the territory. And again, we are willing to listen to you, the people, to be able to make adjustments where possible so that we do not compromise the health and the safety of our people while doing so." So, Jaman, I think all around it's an unfortunate situation, but all we can do is try our best in these times.
Kyla, you know, one of the things we continue to reiterate here is that because COVID is such a new and fluid situation, we have to give different jurisdictions props for doing what they think is best for their respective jurisdiction. And like the Premier said, indeed, some countries across the region have embraced very stringent measures, but we also have to look at the fact that not all of those countries are as tourism reliant and dependent as we are on tourism. And we also have to look at the ports coming into the BVI. What are the main ports? We have to look at St. Martin. We have to look at Antigua. We also have to look at the U.S. Virgin Islands and see what they're doing, because essentially our tourists will be in transit through their ports, and we want to ensure that we can, despite them traveling through those ports, and those countries might maybe having better attractive protocols, we want to ensure that we could still retain our tourists here in the BVI.
Most definitely. I think it really and truly goes back to health and economy.
Yes.
And it's definitely a back and forth and definitely something that we have to look into. But viewers, we are out of time. So of course, that is it for our news roundup. I am Kyla Kenesha Forbes.
And my name is Javon Wilson. I want to thank you so much for joining us once again and invite you to join us again tomorrow, Thursday, for another edition of 284 News. Take care.
Bye-bye.